Hello, this is Jakki Mohr, and I'll be doing a recording on innovation ecosystems for emerging technologies. It's common to diagram an industry in terms of its supply chain, which has the customers on the downstream side and the suppliers on the upstream side. Typically, the flow of dollars for a supply chain go downstream. The flow of dollars goes upstream, while the supply of goods and services goes downstream. So if you're a customer and you want to buy a car for personal consumption, B2C, you would go to a car dealer, you would work out financing, pay them the money, and you would drive off the lot with your car. The dealers get their cars from auto manufacturers. Oftentimes, these manufacturers are referred to as OEMs. OEMs stand for the original equipment manufacturer, and it's a name that's used commonly in any manufacturing industry. And those car manufacturers get their supplies from a variety of first-tier and second-tier suppliers, where they pay the suppliers for the raw materials such as tires or glass or metal, and those shipments then go to the car manufacturer's production lots. This constellation of partners is very important, but when a customer decides to use a particular product, such as a car, we also know that there are additional considerations that need to be involved. So from a customer perspective, the question becomes, what else is necessary for a customer to buy and own a car or to use the car? And these are called the other ecosystem players. We know customers need to finance the purchase frequently, so banks would be part of the ecosystem. We drive cars on roads. The roads are maintained by taxes and registration fees from the government. People need driver's license and vehicle registration, so the government is an ecosystem player. Cars need to be fueled up, and so if it's an electric vehicle, that would include electricity through utilities. We might also use convenience stations if it's gasoline, for example. Insurance, emergency roadside services, the list goes on. And if you want to do add-ons for your car, all of those complements are also provided by a constellation of partners. And ultimately, people own a car so that they can go places. And in this particular case, that might be for tourism, things to do, places to go see, or trailers to pull, boats to pull, recreation, etc. So when we talk about these broader set of issues that affect the car purchase and use, what that boils down to is what is known as an ecosystem. Businesses use the word ecosystem that was originally designed in biology, where a set of organisms mutually depend on each other for survival. This is sometimes called symbiosis or mutualisms. The biological ecosystem includes all the living organisms, which are biotic or biological, as well as the physical environment, which are considered abiotic, things like rocks and soil that aren't necessarily living. Business has used that biological ecosystem to connote the idea that for a customer, they need to have more than just the supply chain. The ecosystem can sell complementary products, provide after-sales services, and other products and services that are vital to the overall customer experience. And the role of the ecosystem is to make these connections with customers deeper and stronger in order to create better competitive advantage. Now, in emerging technologies, we have to broaden this idea of the business ecosystem and really consider the nature of innovation to start with. Innovation means that these are new technologies and new products. And as a result, the ecosystem oftentimes is a whole new constellation of partners and complementers that do not already exist. And this ecosystem is really important because pragmatic customers, who are the early majority or the mainstream market, have to know that the complete ecosystem is going to be in place before they're willing to drive off, say, with an electric vehicle. They want to know where the chargers are going to be and if it's going to be easy to charge. So this innovation ecosystem means that all elements are needed so that the customer has no surprises when they purchase, own, use, and even dispose of the product. We're all concerned about recycling of car batteries. So at this point, knowing the nature of innovation means that an innovation ecosystem is more complicated than a traditional business ecosystem, where we already have an idea of who the players might be and what customers need. This idea of an innovation ecosystem is something that I had the opportunity to explore when I was on a National Academies of Science committee for 3 years during the Obama administration. And the task of the committee was to look at the social and infrastructural barriers to the deployment of electric vehicles in the United States transportation grid. So I'll be drawing some of my information on this material from that particular National Academies of Science report. Now, this term innovation ecosystem is used in a wide variety of ways. And before we do a deep dive, I just want to make sure to clarify some of the differences with other types of lexicon. A national innovation ecosystem is one that is supported at the country level by the government, and it funds universities and national labs to do basic research and development. So in the United States, this ecosystem would be considered something like the National Science Foundation. In addition, we know that different ecosystems are required to support entrepreneurship and innovation in different communities. So for example, if we have something that's called the Montana Technology Enterprise Center, that would be an institution that's designed to help businesses succeed at the startup phase. This would include things like incubators, providing venture capital financing, universities to help with R&D and commercialization, attorneys to help file intellectual property rights, and all of the elements that an entrepreneur would need to get their business off the ground. That is also called an innovation ecosystem. For purposes of this recording, we're going to be talking about the firm's business strategy and how the firm identifies the partners that are needed so that customers have all the elements that are required when they purchase the innovation. And that means we will be taking the customer perspective. And as I mentioned before, customers need to know that all of the elements that are required for this new thing to perform as promised are going to be available when they're ready to use it. And in the language of Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, he refers to this as the whole product, an end-to-end solution. So when we talk again from the customer perspective about electric vehicles, what we see is they have a whole host of questions about buying and owning an electric vehicle. And I'm not going to read through all these, but you can get a sense of how different it is than purchasing a gas-powered vehicle. Similarly, we know that emergency medical technicians wonder about battery safety. Cities and counties wonder if there's going to be enough money for roads, because right now a lot of the roads are paid for by a gasoline tax. And even the car salespeople are concerned about selling EVs because oftentimes they work much harder to sell the car, but they don't make a bigger commission for the extra effort. Car dealers' revenue stream is heavily dependent on service, and EVs don't need the same level of service. And even the margins on EVs are very different than the efficiencies of production from an internal combustion engine, where the margins can be higher. All of these enter into the set of incentives and disincentives that different players in the ecosystem have to support the new emerging technology. So to be clear, the innovation ecosystem for new products includes all the various players that will affect the customer's experience in buying, owning, and using the product, that play a role in ensuring the product performs as promised over time. These are complementers. So if you take your car to an independent repair shop, for example, and all these players have a stake or an incentive or disincentive in the product's operation, success, and failure. So we know that regulators have a role in this, competitors, industry trade associations such as the National Car Dealership Association, who really push back hard against Tesla not having dealerships under dealer franchise laws. The innovation ecosystem often also includes concerns around compatibility across emerging standards, where standards refer to plug-and-play compatibility. In this particular case, we know that industry standards help alleviate customer fear, uncertainty, and doubt so that if they buy a particular electric vehicle, their charge type will be aligned with any chargers that they might want to use on the roadways. So the charging is an important complementary product, and the incentive to build those is based on platform compatibility or industry standards, plug-and-play compatibility. But the fact is, for EVs, there is not a standard rule for compatibility, and this leads to quite a few complications in the deployment of charging infrastructure. The CHAdeMO plug is used for Nissan Leaf. Tesla has its own unique proprietary charger, and then GM and other automakers in the US use something called the SAE 1772 plug. Kind of a joke that was obviously named by an engineer. This is no different than the platforms that are used to create mobile apps. Android has a different set of rules compared to the Apple operating system, the iOS. And from an innovation ecosystem perspective, it's really important that there be collaboration across all of these offerings so that customers have a coherent solution available to them in the marketplace. So let's talk about the stakes that different ecosystem players have with respect to electric vehicles. From the dealership and dealer sales perspective, what we see is that there's a disincentive in terms of the incremental time that it takes to sell an electric vehicle to a customer. And from a customer perspective, it's really hard to compare EVs because you can't drive 5 different brands of EVs in one dealership, given the way the country's dealer franchise laws work. In addition, dealerships have a disincentive because they're not going to make as much money on the oil changes and car servicing that is required. In terms of fueling up, we know that it takes longer for electric vehicles to charge than to just top off your gas tank. And as a result, we're seeing electric vehicle charging stations deployed by cities as a way to draw people to stay longer downtown. Employers have to consider workplace charging. And retailers have done studies that show if they provide charging, customers are likely to stay longer and spend more money. But the flip side of that is that for municipalities, employers, and retailers, the charging infrastructure needs to be placed fairly closely to the actual store or the building so that the utility cables can be extended, but that displaces handicap parking and other requirements for people who need to park close to the building. And again, these disincentives are also clear in terms of the lack of taxes for electricity to pay for roads, the ability of emergency roadside services to help cars that have run out of charge. Do they just pull up with a way to charge any electric vehicle battery? And ultimately, people, again, drive their cars to have places to go, things to do. And when you think about that in the Western United States in particular, you wonder about the ability of EVs to really navigate the environment we're in. So from an emerging technology perspective, the new technology can be value creating, but the innovation can also be value destroying. And you'll see that it can be both things for some players. So from an EV perspective, we know the market opportunity is huge right now, but the fact is it's value destroying in the sense that all of the existing manufacturing facilities maybe are not going to be as fully utilized as new facilities come online to build electric vehicles. This is an example of drawing an innovation ecosystem and how a particular company by the fictitious name Tekko in Finland used their strategy to build out their ecosystem partners over a 7-year time frame as the company went to market. And I'm not going to go over the examples of this except to highlight how important it is from the outset for an emerging technology company of smart utility systems for home energy management to think immediately who the partners are that they're going to need to engage with, and if those partners are actually going to realize value from this new thing, or if in fact it's going to require them to make investments and change the way they do things, in which case it'll be quite difficult. So the major implications of an innovation ecosystem is that a company who is going to introduce a new emerging technology to market cannot rely on its own strategy to achieve success in the marketplace. It has to think very carefully about the constellation of partners that will be required for customers to successfully own and use the product. And 3 rules come out of this: that if your partners aren't ready when you're ready to launch, then it really doesn't matter if you have a first mover advantage, because your partners aren't going to be there to round out the solution customers need. And in this case, paradoxically, it may make more sense for a business to allocate resources to help the infrastructure develop rather than internal allocations. And then in terms of risk assessment, which is critically important for bringing emerging technologies to market, we oftentimes think about technology risk and market risk, but all of a sudden we need to also be assessing the ecosystem risk and when will partners be ready. The article by Ron Adner in the Harvard Business Review provides a wealth of insights about managing these innovation ecosystems. And I've just pulled a couple quotes here that I particularly like from his article. It's important for an emerging technology company to craft a strategy that mitigates ecosystem risk, or that company should forego the opportunity that the emerging technology provides. And there aren't any bad numbers in terms of the amount of the investment or the length of time it will take. It's all about setting accurate expectations. And that ecosystems mean companies have to plan for delays that are outside their control, particularly with respect to emerging technology. Now, there are a host of other tools that can be used to help manage emerging technology from a startup perspective. The business model canvas has a key quadrant allocated to the key partners that are going to be required. And I just want to draw this to your attention because this is a commonly used business plan tool for emerging technologies to use. And the first quadrant we see there is key partners. And the Boston Consulting Group has a really nice series of ecosystem management white papers that I would encourage people to look at to really understand the different types of ecosystems that can be developed by different types of strategies. There's a lot of reading on platform competition today, and that would be another resource that people could use to help understand the role of platforms in developing emerging technologies. That ends the recording for Innovation Ecosystems, and I look forward to being able to apply this material as we get together in classes. Thank you.